Everyone thought she had been erased. The forgotten daughter. The dramatic one. The problem child no one wanted to deal with. When her parents told her, "Don't come home, your sister doesn't want you there," they believed they were closing a chapter. They had no idea they were starting a transformation. Because while they were pretending she didn't exist, she was building a life that would one day replace them. And when they tried to return, they discovered something no parent expects. They no longer had a place in her story. For most of my life, I learned how to take up as little space as possible. I became quiet not because I had nothing to say, but because no one was listening. In my family, love wasn't loud, it was selective. It flowed in one direction, always toward my younger sister, always away from me. She was the fragile one. The sensitive one. The one who needed protection. I was the one who was told to understand, to be mature, to stop being dramatic. So I adapted. I became responsible. Helpful. Reliable. The daughter who didn't cause problems. The one who didn't demand attention. I learned how to read moods before entering rooms. How to soften my voice. How to shrink my needs so no one would accuse me of being difficult. I didn't want special treatment, I just wanted to belong. Birthdays were often forgotten or rescheduled. School events were too busy. Celebrations happened without me and were explained away later. And every time I tried to express that it hurt, I was labeled emotional. Too sensitive. Too much. Overreacting. So I stopped speaking. Not because the pain disappeared, but because silence was safer than rejection. By the time I turned 32, I had a job, a routine, a small apartment, and a life that looked stable from the outside. But inside, I still carried the same quiet question I had as a child. What is wrong with me that my own family doesn't choose me? I didn't know yet that the answer wasn't about me at all. It was about a system that needed a scapegoat. And I was the easiest one to erase. But erasure only works if the person disappears. And I was still standing. In our family, power didn't come from authority or reason. It came from my mother's moods. She decided who mattered, who was forgiven, who was protected. And from the moment my younger sister was born, the hierarchy was clear. I was expected to understand. To adjust. To step aside gracefully. My mother called it keeping the peace. What it really meant was teaching me that harmony existed only when I stayed quiet. If my sister cried, plans changed. If she felt overwhelmed, conversations stopped. If she didn't like me around, I became the problem. My father noticed. He always did. But noticing was where his involvement ended. Silence was his contribution. Avoidance his specialty. Over time, I became the family's emotional buffer. The one expected to absorb tension so others could remain comfortable. If something felt off, it was my fault for being sensitive. If I withdrew, I was accused of holding grudges. There was no winning, only enduring. The imbalance was subtle enough to be deniable, but consistent enough to be crushing. I learned to read my mother's tone the way others read weather forecasts. I learned when to speak and when to disappear. And my sister learned something too, that my exclusion was not only acceptable, but useful. By the time we were adults, the roles were cemented. My mother didn't need to explain her decisions anymore. She simply announced them. And everyone adjusted, except me. I didn't challenge her openly. I didn't rebel. I just started noticing something unsettling. Every time she chose my sister, she was also choosing a future where I didn't belong. The first time they pushed me out, they didn't call it rejection. They called it practical. My sister was going through a sensitive phase, my mother said. She needed calm. Stability. Less tension. And somehow, without anyone saying my name directly, I became the tension that needed to be removed. It was a small thing on the surface. A family dinner planned without telling me. I found out when I saw photos later, everyone smiling, gathered around a table I had helped set 100 times before. When I asked why I hadn't been invited, my mother sighed heavily, like I'd exhausted her just by asking. "We didn't want to upset your sister," she said. "You know how emotional you can be." That was the first time I understood how carefully the narrative had been shaped. My feelings weren't just inconvenient, they were dangerous. A risk. Something that had to be managed for the sake of everyone else's comfort. My sister didn't have to ask for my exclusion. My mother anticipated it. I tried to adapt. I spoke less. I apologized for things I hadn't done. I showed up early, left quietly, smiled when I wanted to ask questions. I thought if I became easier, smaller, quieter, I would earn my way back in. Instead, the exclusions became more frequent. Birthdays rescheduled without me. Holidays adjusted around her moods. Conversations that stopped when I entered the room. Each time, they insisted it wasn't personal. But exclusion doesn't have to be loud to be deliberate. And somewhere deep inside, a question began to form: how many times can you be left out before it becomes intentional? 3 days before Thanksgiving, my phone rang. I was already packing. I hadn't been home in months, and despite everything, I still believed holidays were neutral ground. Moments where family rules softened. I was wrong. My mother's voice was controlled, almost rehearsed. "We need to talk," she said. Then came the sentence that split my life in two. "Don't come home. Your sister doesn't want you here." No argument. No discussion. Just a decision delivered like logistics. My sister was pregnant, my mother explained. Emotional. Fragile. She didn't need stress. And somehow, I was still the stress. Still the problem that needed removing so others could feel comfortable. I asked if we could talk about it. My mother cut me off. "This isn't about you." That was the cruelest part, being erased while fully present. Being told your absence is an act of care for someone else. That Thanksgiving, I ate alone in a small apartment, watching families through restaurant windows. I didn't cry right away. I sat very still, staring at my untouched plate, trying to understand how easily I had been dismissed. I waited for a follow-up call. An apology. A change of heart. None came. And in that silence, something terrifying became clear: they weren't punishing me. They were perfectly comfortable without me. I thought the silence would end on its own. That after Thanksgiving, someone would call and pretend it had all been a misunderstanding. A few days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. My birthday passed without a message. Then Christmas. Then New Year's. Each date landed like a quiet confirmation I had not been missed. What hurt most wasn't the distance, it was the effort it took to maintain it. They had to actively remember to forget me. To talk around my name. To build family moments that required my absence to feel complete. I wasn't just excluded. I was edited out. I tried once more. I sent a short message to my father. Nothing emotional. Just, "Are you okay?" He replied days later with one line: "Things are complicated right now." Complicated enough to erase a daughter. Simple enough to ignore her. That was when the truth finally settled in my chest. I had lost my family without a fight, without a scene, without even a clear ending. No one had slammed a door. They had just closed it quietly and walked away. I stopped reaching out after that. Not out of pride, but because reaching someone who has decided you don't exist does something dangerous to your sense of worth. They moved on without me. And I was left with a question I couldn't escape: if they could live so easily without me, what was I holding on to? Losing them didn't look dramatic from the outside. I still went to work. I still paid bills. I still smiled when people asked about my family and answered vaguely, as if distance were a choice instead of a verdict. But inside, something fundamental unraveled. When a family disappears without explanation, your mind fills the gaps with blame, and mine pointed inward. I replayed conversations at night, wondering which version of myself had been too much. Too sensitive. Too honest. Too inconvenient. I told myself I should have been calmer, quieter, easier to love. That if I had learned earlier how to disappear politely, maybe they wouldn't have needed to erase me completely. I spent holidays alone. I avoided grocery stores near Thanksgiving. I learned which days were hardest and planned silence around them. I didn't rage. I didn't confront. I folded inward and carried the weight privately, because grief without witnesses feels shameful, like you're mourning something that never officially existed. What hurt most was the lack of confirmation. No message saying, "We made a mistake." No explanation. Just absence stretched thin across years. It forced a realization I wasn't ready for. Closure wasn't coming from them. And when you understand that, you're left with a dangerous crossroads: keep waiting for people who left, or decide what to do with the space they created. The breaking point didn't come with tears or shouting. It came quietly, on an ordinary morning, when I realized I was exhausted from hoping. Hoping they would remember me. Hoping they would soften. Hoping I could earn a place that should have never been conditional. I looked at my phone and understood something with unsettling clarity. Every unanswered message had trained me to doubt my worth. And I was done participating in that lesson. So I stopped explaining myself. I stopped defending my pain. I stopped reaching for people who had already decided I was optional. Silence, for the first time, wasn't punishment, it was protection. I made a promise that day, one no one else heard: I would never beg to be included again. Not in a room. Not in a family. Not in a life. That choice didn't heal me instantly. It didn't make me strong overnight. But it shifted something critical. Instead of waiting to be chosen, I began watching. Listening. Learning who noticed my absence, and who felt relieved by it. They assumed my quiet meant defeat. They mistook my withdrawal for weakness. And that misunderstanding would shape everything that came next. While I rebuilt my life quietly, my family rewrote the story without me. In their version, I had drifted away. I was busy. Sensitive. Easier to dismiss than to explain. My absence became proof that I was the problem, because if I were truly important, I would have stayed and endured. I learned this much later, through fragments and secondhand comments. They spoke about me in past tense, like a phase they had outgrown. My mother framed it as sacrifice. My sister framed it as necessity. My father framed it as regret wrapped in helplessness. Different words, same outcome, no one reached for me. Psychologically, that was their greatest mistake. They believed silence meant surrender. That without protest, I had accepted their judgment. They didn't see that I was studying the pattern, how quickly love turned conditional, how easily they justified cruelty when it protected their comfort. I noticed something else too: without me, they needed a new balance. Someone else to absorb tension. Someone else to manage guilt. Systems built on scapegoats always do. I wasn't there to see it collapse, but I felt the shift. And I understood something critical before any of them did. They thought they had erased me, but what they had really done was give me space to decide who I would become without their permission. Thanksgiving came again, and this time I didn't avoid it, it found me. I was sitting alone in a small restaurant, the kind that stays open for people with nowhere to go. I wasn't crying. I was numb, staring at a plate I hadn't touched, rehearsing how to get through the evening without breaking. That's when a woman about my mother's age approached my table. She didn't ask why I was alone. She didn't offer pity. She simply smiled and said, "No one should eat today by themselves." Her voice carried certainty, not sympathy. I sat with her family that night. No explanations. No interrogations. Just space. They passed food. They laughed. They included me without needing a reason. And something inside me cracked, not from pain, but from relief. Later, she told me she had been a lawyer for most of her life. Retired now. Observant. She said she could recognize someone who had been taught to minimize themselves. "You're not invisible," she said quietly. "You were trained to believe you are. That sentence stayed with me long after the plates were cleared. As I left, she hugged me like it was natural. Like I belonged there. And for the first time in years, I wondered, what if the table I lost wasn't the one I was meant to sit at? I didn't announce my intentions. I didn't send letters or call my mother to explain myself. Instead, I began building a life they couldn't touch, quietly, deliberately. Every decision became a piece of a plan, where I lived, who I spent time with, how I invested my energy, even what name I would claim for myself one day. I focused on relationships that honored me. My new family, the one who chose me, became the foundation of everything. I watched, listened, learned patterns. How my mother expected obedience. How my sister justified exclusion. How my father avoided confrontation at all costs. These were their strengths, yes, but also their predictable weaknesses. I began small, accepting invitations from people who valued me, saying no to events that demeaned me, creating emotional boundaries without explanation. Each boundary felt revolutionary. Each choice strengthened my control. It was subtle. Invisible to them. They continued their lives, thinking I had faded, that I had nothing left to claim. And that belief would be their undoing. I was no longer waiting to be chosen. I was choosing, silently, deliberately, the life they had refused to give me. Just as I settled into my new rhythm, a complication arose. My mother, curious about my absence, began asking mutual acquaintances about me. Little questions, seemingly innocent. Is she coming for the holidays? Does she still live in the city? Each inquiry was like a small tremor threatening to shake the foundation I had carefully built. I realized then that secrecy was fragile. One careless word could expose the life I had crafted without confrontation. I couldn't let my boundaries, my chosen family, or my peace be threatened by their curiosity. So I became even more meticulous. Every social interaction, every post, every mention of my past was measured. I protected my space without aggression, without making my strategy visible. Their assumptions about my absence were reinforced. They believed I had been passive, defeated, forgotten. Yet internally, I was poised. Every move, every silence, every careful choice was a thread in a larger design they could not see. The risk was high, but the reward, reclaiming my life on my terms, was higher. And in that quiet vigilance, I discovered the most powerful truth. They could attempt to interfere, but control was mine now, hidden, absolute, unstoppable. There was a moment when I understood that moving forward meant letting something die. Not a person. A hope. The hope that one day my mother would call and say she was sorry without conditions. The hope that my sister would finally see me as a sister, not an inconvenience. The hope that my father would choose courage over silence. Letting go of that hope hurt more than their absence ever had. It felt like grief without a funeral, like closing a door that had never truly been open. But sacrifice is rarely loud. It happens quietly, in the privacy of your own chest, when you choose reality over fantasy. I stopped checking for messages that never came. I stopped rehearsing conversations I would never have. I released the version of myself that kept waiting to be chosen by people who had already decided I was expendable. In its place, something steadier formed. Resolve. Clarity. Freedom. I wasn't punishing them. I was finally protecting myself. What they didn't know was that this emotional severing wasn't an ending, it was the final step before something irreversible began. By the time the wedding invitations were finalized, every piece was already in place. My new last name. My new parents. My new life, fully documented, legally binding, and emotionally settled. Nothing about it was impulsive. This wasn't revenge built on anger. It was structure. It was permanence. I knew my biological family would hear about the wedding. News like that always travels. Status has a way of pulling people out of silence. I didn't need to invite them. I didn't need to warn them. All I had to do was let them assume. Let them believe blood still guaranteed access. They showed up exactly as I expected, uninvited, confident, rehearsing indignation in advance. My mother wore the expression of a woman prepared to reclaim what she believed was hers. My father followed behind her, already apologizing with his eyes, still too weak to stop anything. They thought the confrontation would be private. A corner. A whispered argument. A scene where I'd shrink like I always had. What they didn't understand was that the ceremony itself was the trap. The seating. The program. The order of names. The silence before the announcement. I stood at the altar calm, grounded, completely unreachable, knowing that in a few minutes, reality would be spoken out loud, and there would be no way for them to rewrite it. The moment the officiant said, "Parents of the bride," the air shifted. Heads turned. My adoptive parents stepped forward, calm, proud, unwavering. My mother's face went pale. Her lips parted, a gasp trapped somewhere between shock and disbelief. My father froze, realizing too late he had no role in this story anymore. I looked directly at them, steady and unflinching. "You abandoned me," I said quietly but clearly. I waited. I watched. I was silent. "And yet you never returned." Every word landed with weight, the truth undeniable. There was no scream. No explosive confrontation. Just consequence. My adoptive father placed a hand on mine, strong, protective. Then he said what I could not: "We didn't steal your daughter. You threw her away." The room felt heavy with realization. The family that once controlled me was powerless now. They were present physically, but they had lost all claim over my life. The audience, my friends, my chosen family, absorbed the moment. Every insult, every exclusion, every silent dismissal of my childhood, crystallized into clarity. I had been invisible to them, but visible to myself. And in that instant, the daughter they abandoned was no longer theirs to manipulate. The ceremony continued, filled with laughter, music, and the warmth I had always longed for but never received from my biological family. My adoptive parents stood by my side, their pride and love unwavering. My husband, steady and supportive, held my hand with quiet assurance. Around us, my chosen family, cousins, friends, extended relatives, celebrated a version of me that had been invisible for too long. My biological parents were escorted out, their disbelief lingering like a ghost. My mother's attempts to reclaim me went unanswered. My father's apologies fell on ears that had long stopped listening. I didn't gloat. I didn't shout. I simply existed fully, the life I had built, the family I had chosen, undeniable and complete. Months later, my daughter's laughter echoed in a home filled with love, her surname a testament to the family that truly wanted me. My career thrived, my relationships were real, my boundaries respected. The family that once dictated my worth had no place in this world I had quietly, carefully claimed. I learned something permanent: family is not blood. Family is choice. And those who refuse to choose you lose forever the seat at your table. For the first time, I felt it clearly: I was no longer a daughter abandoned. I was a woman unstoppable, loved, and finally free. If this story moved you, make sure to like the video and show your support. Your like helps more people see how resilience, patience, and quiet strength can turn betrayal into triumph. Comment below and tell us what you would have done in her place. Would you have stayed silent or taken control like she did? We want to hear your thoughts and personal experiences. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss more emotional, intense stories of clever revenge, life-changing decisions, and the power of choosing your own family.